Is it live or is it Memorex? This is Mitch Hampton, host of Journey of an Aesthete podcast. And this is a kind of you might call a New Year's Eve or New Year's stream, since we're in a new year. It's January 30th, 3 days into a new year of 2025. And I thought I would use the time slot of a Friday. We sometimes do shows. Thank you, our sound producer, our producer Laurie Strickland in Chester, and letting us know that the sound is okay, which is important, especially for this episode. What I was going to say is that I'm using the time frame of a Funky Friday at 5, since this is 5 Eastern Standard Time. 5 o'clock. We're gonna not call it Funky Friday. We're gonna call it New Year's philosophy or New Year's talk, philosophical talk. And as you can see behind me here, we're gonna do a lot of clips. Now, there is a Copyright Act of 1976, and that Copyright Act gives the right to use excerpts of works of art and movies, television, text, books for commentary, educational purposes, and those kinds of purposes. So, that's important to state it up front, so I don't forget, because and even if we because of the algorithms being unsympathetic, if we could talk about inanimate life forms that are, things that are not alive, having sympathy or lack of sympathy or agency, take us down, well, then that we'll have other episodes. So that's kind of the situation. But it would be nice to be able to stream this, because we're going to discuss a lot of things, mainly having to do with what we call time and the calendar year. So the calendar year, we're in January now, 3rd of January, and humans in society and part of society that we call culture invent ways of marking, acknowledging, sometimes honoring, sometimes suffering, undergoing changes in the temporal history of life on Earth. So we're in winter now, for example, and then we'll have a spring. So we have these seasons, and those are marked and those are acknowledged. And we even have, sometimes if you look on a physical calendar, you'll see special days mentioned. It'll say Boxing Day, the day after Christmas. It'll say New Year's Eve, this past Tuesday night. It will say this is New Year's Eve, and then, it's so on. So all the works of art today deal with time in different ways. This is such a big topic. Indeed, it's probably, one of the biggest topics in human art, I think, maybe, because also sometimes individual artworks are themselves acts of time, or acts of temporal construction or acknowledgement, and that it takes time to say a performance. All performances, whether it's ballet or stand-up comedy, Happy New Year, everybody. Performance. If I'm seeing, for example, Richard Pryor, even if I've seen at the age of 8 in a theater with my dad, live in concert, which I did, wasn't fortunate enough to see Richard Pryor. I showed a clip actually last year of that. That's durational, and that there's a beginning before Pryor walks on stage in the red slacks I think he's wearing, and then there's an end point, maybe 90 minutes into the concert where he's done his jokes and done his performed, bared his soul in that case, actually. Well, with Richard Pryor, in all cases, he's baring his soul. And it's over. There's a boundary. There's actually a beginning and an end. And these things really fascinate me. They also fascinate me because I'm a improvising jazz musician, and there's a kind of quality to that style, those styles of music that we kind of crudely put under the label of jazz, that are completely built up by linear time, rhythm and groove and pulse. So if I, for example, if I go, that's a beat, it's a four quarter playing 4/4 quarter walking bass. We can't get to the bass from here, but we can go. Doing the bass and the treble there. And that could be a rhythmic foundation going forward in time. But you can have all sorts of things happen on top of that, around that, surrounding that, inside of it, and so on. So Roku TV, in their wisdom, love to yank things. We've seen this before. I have it paused for 5-10 minutes and it yanks. So try to get back to where we were so I can play this. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to start off with our most recent artwork in time, and it's a picture from 2016. It's actually one of my favorite movies of the past 6-7 years or so. It's on my top list, and that's Mike Mills' 20th Century Women with Greta Gerwig, Annette Bening, and Fanning there, and I'm going to play just a clip. Now, this movie's interesting for so many reasons. It's not just that it's about the 70s, although it is that. But this is an example of a fictional work of art that actually makes as part of its very narrative, as part of the drama, acknowledgement by everybody of time's passing. And the characters do this. The mother here in the center here is going to narrate this clip and talk about the ethics of time, what happens that maybe is unwelcome, or, changes in taste and popular fashion and politics. And so it's beautifully done. I'm just going to play the clip. And the year is 1979, and it's one of my favorite years, of course. And so I'm just going to play it, and hopefully this technology will cooperate with this, and we can hope it's what we got to deal with here. So.
It's 1979. I'm 55 years old. This is what my son believes in. These people, with this hair and these clothes, making these gestures, making these sounds. It's 1979, I'm 55 years old, and in 1999, I will die of cancer from the smoking.
Okay.
Yeah. Do me a favor, just take.
So you have this sort of kind of prose poem, this narration, but it immediately interrupts to a scene of drama. Her talking to Billy Crudup in this rock club, but then it goes back to the narration, back to this prose poem, and it just subtlety of it is really interesting. So it's actually weaving in and out. Another way I like to talk about is internal and external, or interior. So if I give you dates like Mitch Hampton, 1967 through 2024, those years, with the slash in between, that's a very exterior. Those are the years I was alive, and I got to 57 from 1 year old to 57 in those years. That's an example of what you could call exterior or external. It's kind of the stuff that geographers deal with, actually. All historians, if they're any good, deal with. And they're kind of, exterior things, as I conceive of them, have inside of them little touches of affect and things that can be a little bit internal as well. Implication in there, but it's not the major thing. The major thing is sort of like, well, it's like an algorithm's view of the world, in that zeros and ones, it's data, it's fact, that's external. But then you have this kind of stuff, like two human beings talking in this scene, which is more internal. But I didn't mean to interrupt that. I just wanted to talk about kind of what I'm doing here. Back to it.
They don't know this is the end of punk. They don't know that Reagan's coming. It's impossible to imagine that kids will stop dreaming about nuclear war and have nightmares about the weather. It's impossible to imagine HIV, what will happen with skateboard tricks, the internet.
You have a good time?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Abby has your number, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you'll come over for dinner.
I like that.
Kid.
It's late.
So there's her saying it's impossible to imagine is the phrase that repeats. So it's always impossible to imagine the things that occur, the things that blindside us sometimes or catch us off guard. And that's what that. And of course, there's this kid here is a single mom with a. I'm sure this is Mike Mills here, more or less. This boy, I think, the filmmaker. I mean, of course, it's a work of fiction, but I think there's something of his life in here. I don't know. So what I'm trying to evoke is this sense of artwork can, be structured around time. So the epistolary novel, Richardson's, not Pamela, Clarissa. That's right, Clarissa, if you've read that. Might say 1780, and then give the date. If I write a letter to people, I always put the date on the top of the letter out of respect for the receiver. Because from the point of view of this stream and where I'm coming from now, there's a partial reality or truth to what I'm discussing. There's another sense in which these things can be thought of as unreal or convention, a kind of, I guess, maybe a more spiritual view. I don't know. That is not the view I'm taking in this stream. I'm starting from the assumption and proposition that there's some truth to spring following winter, and that we're now at 5 p.m. and it's not 2 a.m. here, it's 5 and so on. But that's not really so important, because there's a sense in which all of it's conventional in that they are rituals that enable us to do things with the facticity of them. So I'm going to jump back and move around here a little bit. It's interesting, to think about objects in time. So this necktie that you are seeing now, this is from 1962. 1962. It's a Stork Club tie. Stork Club was a hip, sophisticated nightclub in New York City in the 20th century, and this is the Stork. And this tie, the narrowness of it, you could see was very popular. You've seen your show, Mad Men. You've seen how people dressed then and what the tie widths were. And I thought it would be interesting to wear a tie from 1962. The kind of thing I normally would do on an aesthetic stream or aesthetic episode stream because it's about dress. But it's and I'm pairing it with a shirt that was made and comes from probably the 2020s. So there's a sense in human life, of course, that humans can mash up or could create collage out of the fragments of remembered time. That's what this movie does, actually, more or less. I mean, it's more than that, of course, but it's one of the things it does. So I thought it'd be interesting to delve into kind of the issue of pacing. When I played this bass line in the treble, or when I played this treble line, this walking line, that was a certain pace, you know. And music can be fast and slow, but so can, of course, movies and TV shows. So I thought it would be interesting. Let's see here. This little thing here. Gendarmerie Croix de Commerce 10 Bruxelles. I can't pronounce all the French there. From 1975 by Chantal Akerman. I'm not going to discuss the plot of this film, and I'm not going to discuss its overall themes and subject and everything that happens in it. But I am going to mention a couple of things that are interesting and possibly show a scene from it. I don't know. It might be on HBO, but I don't know. This is an interesting question. Let's find out. I reached a dilemma because I wanted to originally wanted to use physical copies of things. I'm sure it'll come up. Yeah, here we go. Because the physical copies of things, of course, are always better. Yeah, the physical copies of things are always better. Because you're not reliant on a department, you're not reliant on a platform that you subscribe or don't subscribe, or the fee goes up. You have, just like an LP or a record, you have this. However, in these streams, it's always easier to use platforms and stream because of the awkwardness of the machinery that plays discs. And so that's kind of, I'm always trying to decide, try to find things and see what format. And that search for the best way to show a clip is itself takes time out of one's life, It actually takes time to prepare for this stream. I have to select, well, first of all, I have to select the works of art and think about them. And I have to think about also how I want to discuss them. Because I could talk about them in rather different ways, various ways. Yeah, that's right. Link to the film. So Delphine Seyrig made this film with Chantal Akerman, who I met twice before her most unfortunate suicide in, was it 20? She made Home Movie, I think 2009, 2008. She was a professor of teacher, mentor to my friend Andrew Bajowski, the filmmaker, in Cambridge, Massachusetts at Harvard when Chantal Akerman taught there. And she and I were watching Computer Chess by Andrew Bajowski, and outside a film forum, Chantal Akerman was, of course, lighting a cigarette and getting ready to smoke and talking about how she's trying to quit. That was my brief exchange with the great Chantal Akerman. This film was voted the greatest film of all time by Sight and Sound magazine in 2022, a decision that is interesting, given that there's so many things about the film, so many things about Chantal Akerman herself that run contrary to what films usually are supposed to be. By which I mean Casablanca, The Matrix, Wizard of Oz, Star Wars, Lawrence of Arabia, now Voyager. Of course, now Voyager is much closer to this film, actually, in spirit, actually. But, you know, putting all those caveats aside, Chantal Akerman is on record as saying that she loves Michael Snow more than most of the films I just mentioned. She was interested in avant-garde film. And avant-garde film is film that, as we have discussed, actually repudiates story and narrative. And yet, this film has quite a story. This is a woman who is depicted for close to 4 hours. Most of the film is her doing work that needs to be done around her house. She has a son who seems kind of grown for a son. By which I mean he doesn't seem like a 9 or 10-year-old. You know, he seems rather mature. You never really clear. You never really clear his age, and it's kind of mysterious. And the major thing about this film, why is this film so revolutionary? Well, if you've seen it and you know it, it depicts, I put this in quotes because it's actually not the film. We'll get to in a second why this is not accurate. It depicts in real time human behavior. Cooking, cleaning, tenderizing veal, preparing potatoes, setting the table. I'm going to say a couple things about that. Number one, it is not in real time and it is not durational. Every aspect of this film is constructed out of temporal fragments that is edited together. And there's also a timer, right? So the director, Akerman, says, we'll start here, and there's almost like an egg beater almost. All these scenes are timed, whereas in a cinema verite film or a film that is durational, you really turn the camera on and what happens is what happens for quite a long period of time. But the film creates the illusion of something that's durational, is kind of how I would put it, if that does fairness to it. It's tricky. And I don't even know what part of it I want to show. I mean, I'm going to try to root around and see, to give you a sense of this. And so there's a sense in which her performance, this Delphine Seyrig here, is a little bit like, and this makes the film interesting, is a little bit like other art form, modern ballet, choreography, contemporary dance. I feel that. I've always felt that. It's not discussed when people talk about this film, but there's a quality of that. So it says watch now. I'm going to just go through the this is, again, less than ideal way to watch this, but it's what we got. Let's see here. Let's see here. All right. I'm gonna say a couple things about this movie. So this film is considered to be the first of its kind, the first that does this, the first that puts a spotlight on women as part of the human family and what they would have done in these years, and sort of in a way honoring that and giving more attention to what they would have done or what this woman is doing in this film. It's also, they would have said revolutionary for that. You know, when I was 9 years old, I read about this film before I ever saw it. I would read about it at ages 8, 9, 10. I would try to find cahiers de cinema, copies of it at the library. I was obsessed with it. And I didn't really get to see it until the late 80s. And of course, a rerun or a retrospective, you know. So I always like to say when I first see movies. So that would have been 88, 89. I sat in a theater the 4 hours of this and finally saw it. But I'd read so much about it, you know, debates and whatnot about the film. And so I don't really know what to show, but just to give you a flavor of the rhythmic nature of her performance, of this actress's performance, there's a sense, again, of rhythm. And she slaps at objects and she closes doors. There's a kind of a abruptness. I don't know if it'll come through in this. I mean, she get a sense of it. Look at her. Notice her face while she does these chores. So this is where she keeps her money, and one of the things she does for money is, I think according to Chantal Akerman in a documentary, it's only a half hour of sex with her clients in the afternoon, and she's living with her son, so that's the money she's putting into this this china there. So that's 4 hours of a lot of the movie. But notice the rhythm of the cash and the sound of the So the plot such as it is that she, in this stage of the film, she has great satisfaction from her work doing well what she is skilled at doing in the context of this house, her home. But then things start to go south for her. Start to go really, really wrong. And that's the sort of it's a tragedy according to its filmmaker. She called it not a melodrama, but a tragedy. And that's how the film plays out if you haven't seen it. When things start to not work, when the chores start to not go so well, it does deserve the praise it's gotten by Sight and Sound. I don't know that high praise. There are thousands and thousands of motion pictures made. This is one of them. It's good. It's a good one. It's very good. Top 10 list, top 20 list, top 100 list, I don't know. It's not something that we really do here at Journey of an Aesthete that much. Quite consciously, we don't do that. I might say that this is 20th Century Women is one of my favorite movies of the past 6 years. I might say that. But notice I say one of my favorites. I don't say it's the greatest movie. All of the work we're dealing with today is very contrary to what is now in fashion in film. So what is in fashion now? Well, the movie here, Bob Zemeckis. What is it? Tom Hanks that's playing now. Everywhere, All at Once from a couple years back. So how do movies like that conceive of time? Well, they conceive of we in the audience or the characters having an overall cosmic global awareness of different things happening at different times, going from 1910 to 1950 in a minute, seeing how the styles of human presentation change and fashion, and mixing it up for fun. So there's a sense of mastery. I would call it mastery of history that's created in the spectator. It's created by the work of art. I would say that attitude is very much in fashion now. And that aesthetic style and strategy is, in a way, the opposite of this film. Because this film, after all, is this living room, and you don't leave it. If she leaves this house, it's a big deal. It takes 20 minutes for her to leave this house and go to the post office and find out it's closed. So that's a sense in which contemporary film style is very interested in 19th century ideas. 19th century historicism of the Civil War, the Reconstruction, the 60s. Let's get it all in one film. The English Civil War, the Trafalgar, Lord Nelson. Lord Nelson is reincarnated as a rock star. We're going to show Lord Nelson, and then we're going to show him hundreds of years later with long hair, and he's in Daisy Jones. I'm just saying, I'm making up stuff out of bed. It's a very contemporary way of experiencing time. But I would say that none of us actually experience time that way at all. By definition, we can't. But we can imagine that we do, and maybe we want to. And maybe there's a sense in which we want to escape the present. And that's a kind of time travel. My own music does something like that, although there's some it's adjacent to that without being that, because I'm finally mostly interested in now. Time passing now. We're not going to jump to 1955 because you get bored and you want to look at a house dress that someone wore in 1955. We're not going to jump to 1976 and to a disco. We're not going to jump to, anything, a punk show in 20th century women. We're just going to stay here. From a certain point of view, that's quite narrow, or could be seen as narrow. From another point of view, it's the only thing that's honest, because we're here. And if you're watching over there, you're where you are. Of course, the mind, right? The mind can travel, and this is interesting. These are just different ways of experiencing reality. Ultimately, different ways our consciousnesses are lived, are experienced. And so I want to kind of just go to something else now. It's hard to do on this machine a little bit, so bear with me. Those are some scenes that are never shown from Jean Duman. I say Section 107 of the Copyright Act allows the unlicensed use of copyrighted materials for purposes such as commentary, using parts of a news article, scientific paper for educational purposes. This is an educational stream, an edification stream, and that's what we're doing here. And so that's the thing. So music. I mentioned music. I mentioned tempos. Of course, music is fast or slow. Okay. Music is fast or slow. Music. As I said before, music is not only fast or slow or medium tempo. it's also fast or slow in terms of the information given. Right? This is one of my private playlists. It took time to erect this playlist all about aesthetics.
Neath the stars
So,
at bazaar.
let's do it.
Often I
Sarah Vaughan. In the summer, if you recall, 2024 last year, July, I think, I did a little stream about George Gershwin and harmony. And I did the song Embraceable You on that stream. I wore a cream sort of dinner jacket of sorts and sat here and talked about music harmony and how I study music and Bach and how Bach connected to George Gershwin. Well, we're going to do some music today. We're going to take one song. Now, the song I'm going to use, the single song, is also a Gershwin song. And there are at least three versions of this song that are extremely important. One actually is the Judy Garland one from the 50s. That's kind of a standard bearer for this song, I think. But in terms of for jazz people, it's Sarah Vaughan's 1977 recording with Oscar Peterson, Ray Brown and Louis Bellson as the trio, and Joe Pass on guitar. How long has this been going on? This song was written in the 20s. It was written in 1927, so we're going way back to the world of musical theater, and musical theater before book musicals, or before the book and narrative came in. So prior to Rodgers and Hammerstein and Carousel and Showboat and all that, when musicals had a review quality to them, a little bit like what Sondheim resurrects and Company, going back to the review before the book. And that was in the 20s. And this was a song, like in many works of art, things are cut. A writer cuts parts of the book they're writing, the short story. And this song was cut from Funny Face in its stage incarnation in 1927, and it was used in the show Rosalie, I think in 1928 maybe, And all of this is before Hollywood musicals, before they're, not the Funny Face from the 50s. So I'm not going to deal with the lyrics by Ira Gershwin. They're incredible. I'd love to do a whole separate episode where I discuss just the lyric. Not going to do it. We're going to discuss tempo. This song is a ballad. This song is meant to be performed as a ballad tempo, slow. Sarah Vaughan and the Cats here, they do it as a fast swinging samba. It's most unusual. Sarah Vaughan, I saw Sarah Vaughan in a nightclub in 1982. I remember that gig for that show for many, many, many reasons. One is that it was a 45-minute wait outside. Oh, God, I'm trying to remember the club. Might have been the Vanguard, Village Vanguard, or might have been Sweet Basil. I don't remember very well. But I do remember George Gaffney on piano, her rhythm section in those years. I remember she did this song, did a Gershwin. She had just done a George Gershwin album. And I remember a lot of things about that concert. I could have discussed Send in the Clowns, another famous reading and interpretation by the divine, that's what they called her, divine Sarah Vaughan. But we're going to play How Long Has This Been Going On? There's a verse. We're going to deal with the chorus, the A, and then after this, we're going to play touch of an instrumental version without words that's more a typical ballad. But we'll just have fun with it, and I hope it sounds okay. There's a long sort of bittersweet verse, and we'll just get through the verse, and we'll
had to caress men.
interruption. Oscar Peterson's comping accompaniment, we call it comping. Pay close attention to it. It's remarkable. He does things under her that are almost like a solo. Could be a solo, but he does them under her in such a way that it's never intrusive. Oscar Peterson was a master at that. Oscar Peterson was a master at accompaniment. He was a master at using kind of those kinds of ideas because he had an immense technical skill beyond most pianists of his or any generation, you know. And he knew how to not leave that stuff out and mellow out and chill. But he also knew how to get busy. But it's all works. It's like a clock. It all works together. Louis Bellson, I just wanted to talk about that. So don't just listen to Sarah Vaughan, listen to Oscar's piano.
$5 or $10, then I'd collect from all those yes men. Don't be sad, I must add, that they meant no more than chessmen. Darling, can't you see? 'Twas for charity. Though those lips have made slips, it was never really serious. Who'd have thought I'd be brought to a state that's so delirious? I could cry salty tears. Well, where have I been all these years? Listen, you tell me, dear, how long has this been going on? What a kick, how I buzz. Boy, you click as no one does. In the sleep, I repeat. How long has this been going on? Dear, when in your arms I creep, that divine rendezvous. Don't wake me if I'm asleep. Let me dream it's true. Oh, kiss me twice, then once more. That makes thrice. Let's make it four. Oh, what a break! For heaven's sake! How long has this been going on?
All right. That's what we jazz players call the head, the theme, the melody, and a little bit of the solo. So, bump, 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 da, 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 da. See the feeling of that? And of course, that verse has some comic elements in tone. I called it bittersweet. It's not really. It's complex. There's also the context of what the song's. It's about I think a woman that works in a carousel, or it's 20 stuff. I don't know. Let's hear a little bit of something very contrary to that. Go back to it. Where are we here? This is interesting. This is... I was here this night. This is fellow pianist Brad Meldau, much more famous than myself. I think, I know at the Village Vanguard, playing How Long Has This Been Going On? No lyric, just the melody. And this is interesting for a couple of reasons. Meldau's is interested in interiority. So we just heard a version that's very external, very extroverted. Somebody's, telling this story in a very... It has a groove, and this is going to be a very different way of playing the same song, same melody, different things. So that's a way you could play the melody. It's very, I think he's in G. Think about that for a little bit. Got his own style, his own way of playing, touching the keyboard. I mean, he's not the only cat to do that. I mean, so Cedar Walton would do Body and Soul at a rather brisk tempo, very similar to the Sarah Vaughan, very upbeat. And he did that for most of his late career, arrangement of that. So improvising musicians will often do ballads as barnstormers or ballads as, fat quickly, or they'll do the reverse. They'll often do slow down. The late Stanley Cowell, my teacher back there, would do Charlie Parker songs as extreme ballads, slow ballads. So you could hear every pitch and every chord. That's what he would do. Because after all, we're dealing with a style of music, a genre of music that is about what a human being can do with pre-existing, pre-written materials. There's another attitude, school of thought, that's about honoring what is meant to be in a text. And that is certainly not the school of thought that governs these quite great accomplishments that I'm now discussing. I mean, maybe a little bit. I mean, after all, Sarah Vaughan comes out of the 40s and 50s, and she certainly knows, it's like Cedar Walton knows the origins of this song and very deeply. So you could say that she has authority to alter it. And there's a separate question, of course, about what it is for something that's meant. What is it for an object or a thing in the world to be an object or a thing in the world? What is it to say about it that it was meant to be the way it is? Is there such a thing? Should there be such a thing? These, of course, are, I could have showed the clip from John Dillman and made a snide, sort of snarky joke about a YouTube video on how to make your bed. I was tempted to do so during it because that's what she was doing. And I'm sure there are videos now on YouTube where somebody does that. I mean, there are videos that mock this film, the film John Dillman. There are videos that pontificate on the politics of it, the feminism of it. I mostly think about the first time seeing it and the feeling I had watching this thing, how it made me feel, what it is to. So think about this. I read about this thing for 12, 13 years before I ever saw it. I didn't see it when it came out. It ain't like, I saw Fantasia when it came out. I saw Star Wars and Annie Hall in 77, both when they came out in their first, and Girlfriends with Mel Mayron and Claudia Wow's film when it came out in New York. But I didn't see John Dillman when I saw it 25 years after the thing was made, because it wasn't available to me in 1975, that year. I wasn't able to get to that. I was able to get to the conversation. So each of us has a story with works of art, how we experience it. I mean, we might experience it quite early from the beginning or quite late. There's a lot of videos now made by people that are very, very, I would call them very young, whose experience of some of these things is very recent. They experienced it 40, 30 years after the thing was ever made, or they experienced it quite young, and not say as adults. I personally experienced adult culture, if we could call it that, as a child, as a boy, not as an adult, because, well, if you're living in 1974, 75, and Chinatown is coming out, and Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation is coming out, and Michelangelo Antonioni, which I'll get to in a minute, Antonioni's The Passenger is coming out, you're not going to stay at home. At least I'm not going to stay at home, even if I'm 7 years old. It ain't going to happen. I'm not going to miss it. There's a filmmaker named, there's films that deal with time. I mean, there's the Taiwanese Revolution. I don't know, the new Taiwanese cinema of the early OOs. Simon Ling, Goodbye Dragon Inn, one of the greatest films ever made about cinema. Highly recommend Goodbye Dragon Inn. I got to watch it with Simon Lin in attendance in 2002, 2003. And I had him sign this book. He signed, I said, you are like Antonioni. I said to him, would you sign this Antonioni book? And he did. He signed it. See? 2004. But I could have done a whole episode just on his film, his love poem to the cinema, Goodbye Dragon Inn, which takes place in a movie theater and deals with the theme of disability and queerness and sexuality and cruising and the passage of time. And of course, it's the last showing of a movie theater that's going to close. And the rain and climate change weather and flooding and water coming down in Taiwan and Taiwanese history and the troubles in that part of the world, you know, all of this. And in one film, you know. So when Antonioni makes The Passenger in 75, he's interested too in time, in slowing time down. And so I didn't know whether to show the film or just talk about it. I mean, I will show you this. So this is interesting. At the end of the film, the main character, played by Jack Nicholson of all people, yay Jack. Here's Jack Nicholson having fun, as is with the maestro behind him there, putting the halo around his head, filming The Passenger in the desert. It's about a journalist who, it's about a journalist, a reporter who discovers a man who dies, and Jack Nicholson's character steals his identity. I mean, not in a corny way they would do it today, digitally, but just tries to become that person and fulfill this dead person's itinerary. And that's the film. And at the end of the film, he checks into a hotel and lays down and, in earthly terms, our terms in this stream, dies. And as he dies, his soul has a passage into beyond. And that is filmed in the film. That's the end of the film. But it's the way it's shown. So what does Antonioni do? He decides to shoot the passage of this man's soul, if that's how we want to put it, in one take, no cuts. It took him days to do it, to construct the camera. I'm going to show you some stills. Turn this off here. Let's, what do we got here? Bear with me. We didn't get to the bridge. I apologize to fans of that. Yeah, we're over here. I'm just gonna. Yeah, there's Jack. Yeah, here we go. These are stills of Antonioni filming this last shot. Antonioni and Andrei Tarkovsky were close friends and influenced each other a lot. So there's that to consider. Yeah, this is when they discover his body. So it's a traveling shot of the camera going through these bars. Now, of course, it's you know, these bars you can see here represent confinement. And the camera's gonna, the whole scene, I'm not gonna play the whole scene. I'd love to, but I don't want to. Maybe you should watch it. Just it's 4 minutes, but I'll show a little bit of the effect, little bit. And I don't really mean to do violence to Antonioni's film by chopping it up like this. So apologies, but. Let's see here, a little bit. Yeah, this. Yeah. There's some kind of a. We're gonna go through this window. It's a window. And there's action going on outside. A boy and throwing something. A dog. A trumpet. We're in Spain. In 1975, it's Spanish. And see how imperceptibly it's moving? You see how the thriller part of the movie, the action part of the police and the stuff going on, and the girls run. There's action, but the film wants to separate us from the action or the resolution of the action and focus on it's the Stations of the Cross, if you want to put it that way, of this man's life. It's a different. See, we're moving ever more so. Yeah. We're gonna get outside. Don't worry. It's better. There's all kind of stuff going on over here. I'm gonna go through the. Why? So beautiful. I guess all that has to be arranged. Yeah. Yeah. Are we gonna get beyond the bars? It takes time sometimes for things to happen. You're an ambulance, some kind of thing. There's all kinds of ways. That's one of the greatest scenes in cinema history, actually. And if you think, I've seen it many times, I think about, it doesn't show this guy talking to an angel. None of that. It doesn't, you don't have elaborate special effects. It's just the bars and the stone in the desert. And it's just, because we're with this character and we're just going to stay with him. We're going to float. So this is Antonioni's interpretation or way of being spiritual in the cinema. His way of doing it. So other people do something different. Something a little more, by different I mean something more telegraphed, more dramatic perhaps. More spelled out for us, or filled with content. Antonioni is a modernist. He's a minimalist. He's like Brad Mehldau, the piano selection we just heard. It's there's all kinds of different ways of making a work of art. There's all kinds of various ways of writing a poem, of playing a piece of music, of writing a novel. I mean, we're dealing with these rabbit novels by John Updike now, this series, and in many ways, that very series that I'm doing is all about time. It's about 1959 to 1969 and what's going on, and 79 and the energy crisis, and so that's an example I could use of a work of art, fictional work of art that is made up and made out of time as we humans experience it, which is sort of if that's the tempo we choose. We experience life in time, and we experience it. Hopefully, we experience life in a groove, or with some groove, or with swing, and feeling, and all the rest of that. And if we are up for doing so, in that moment, and we experience it here, we're here now. We're not elsewhere. There's a wonderful book by Richard Poirier, about American literature, and he tells it a world elsewhere. And in it, he talks about Nathaniel Hawthorne and, folks like him who are perhaps longing for a world elsewhere. But of course, when I read Suzuki Roshi, Shunryo Suzuki in 1979, 1980, but it would have been very young. Suzuki Roshi would talk about, he says, with our practice, meaning the practice that he's teaching, that they're doing, he says, you can be here with yourself right now. As if that was sort of the greatest, for Suzuki, like the greatest achievement is to be with your own mind and body right now. That was something to that had some virtue maybe in it. There's all these different ways of relating to reality and time. We can be elsewhere, or we could be here. We can be elsewhere without physically going elsewhere, of course, some say, something. There's all kinds of different ways of doing it. In an episode like this, we can only do so much. I can use the television and play clips. The episode might get taken down, might not. It might survive. It might be evanescent, like all things, right? It might last a week, a month. People might watch it. They might not watch it. They most likely will watch it while doing other things, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe they'll watch it while walking a dog. Maybe they'll be making a bed while they listen to it. There's all these different, the world is has a lot of choices. I'm sure I forgot something, but hopefully there will be future episodes, and then what I forgot to discuss, I can bring up then. But these are all ways of essentially dealing with the fact that we're faced with, the fact that it is now January and February will come. And that's 30 days, 28, 27 days from now. We got to get through those days. As I said, it's something we can suffer. I'm using suffering not the way it's used now so much, in order to undergo, not necessarily always pejorative, but, or we could simply undergo, or we can experience, are you experienced? Jimi Hendrix. We can experience in different ways. So hopefully in this show, the Chantal Akerman, the Antonioni, Mike Mills, Mike Mills, are in the company of those two greats, I think. So there we are. I've said it. It's his 20th Century Women. And there are others too. So 2025 will have a lot of things, and like the Annette Bening character in 20th Century Women, it is impossible really to imagine Saturday and Sunday, or at least imagine them as they, well, it's not impossible to imagine them. We're imagining things all the time, but it's impossible to imagine what it's really going to be. We can't know that now, what's in store for us. We can imagine it, but It won't be the exact thing that's going to happen, right? And it's those kinds of motifs that are the subject of this stream. Thank you for subscribing. Try to get more subscribers. Journey of an Aesthete podcast. Become a Patreon subscriber, and we're going to have things coming up that will be musical, that will be all sorts of things. Have to do with things coming up having to do with metalsmithing, having to do with Hollywood and the studio system, episodes having to do with, well, here's a question. What is it like to run an arts? This is a subject that's going to come up because I'm talking to some people now that go, what is involved in producing things? That's an issue that takes time. You have to produce a show. What is it like to put on an art show? I put on a exhibiting. You know, that you have the stands and the different people show their wares. They have booths. That's something that somebody or people have to produce that. You have to coordinate that. It's actually a little bit like the fire department. You know, the fire department, the Department of Education. We have these departments, public or private, but anything that's made, like this very episode, this show had to be made by folks. They had to, you know, we have to, they have platforms, like in this case, we're using StreamYard, which was set up, and it's very complex, and you got to learn how it works. We have an Apple computer, somebody else have another computer. What I'm saying is that, you know, again, we're dealing with this subject of things being made. Humans create things. They make things. And, you know, a lot goes into that. That involves things like scheduling, making phone calls, maybe, texting. This is at 5 o'clock. It is now 6:12, 7 o'clock. Right. Making sure does it require rehearsal? Are we off book or on book? Have we internalized? When I discuss music, one of the biggest subjects, and I'm going to discuss this when I do my music stream in February, where I learn a new song on the air. I'm going to do a stream where I actually learn in real time here, learn a song in front of you that I've never played before. Well, I have to internalize that song that I'm learning. It has to become a part of me. Is that like an actor learning a part? Or a musician learning, a conductor learning a score? I think it might have some relationship to that. Is that like producing itself? Anything? I wonder. Interesting. That's something to think about. It becomes a big problem when you're not learning something somebody has done, a song, but you have to make the whole thing yourself. That you have to write the song yourself. That's a lot of, sometimes, you know, you think it's easier to learn somebody else's stuff, you know, and in repertoire, like, you know, classical musicians do that. They do Brahms' text, they do Beethoven's text, they don't do Jane Smith, and they don't do, you know, some people don't, but, you know, I like to make up things and create things myself. That's a whole other level of work involved with a project like that. So enough joking, but I really enjoyed doing this, and in the future we'll come back to some of these themes in our aesthetic streams, and of course with guests. So have a great weekend if you can, and I hope your 2025 is better than your 2024, which might not be so hard to do, actually, for it to be better. That might be doable. All right. Thank you.